On today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we're talking through 4 players whose dynasty stock will surge the most based off of which team selects them. All 4 of these guys that we're going to talk through today are ultra talented players, but most of them project to play in more of a specialized role out of the gates, or maybe even just need ample volume to develop. And it'll be critical that the team who selects them as the coaching staff of the offensive system to support their unique talents. So Aiden and I aren't insinuating that these guys won't be good, because spoiler, we have someone here that we think is very good, right? So we're not insinuating that they are team dependent to an extent. Maybe some are. But the fact that if they want to reach their lofty ceilings, they're going to need to be in the right situation. So the goal of today's episode is to give you all a reason why these guys might be more situational dependent than others and give the upside case if they land in the right situation. But before we dive into today's episode, one quick thing. If you are a part of the 70% of people watching this video that have not yet subscribed to the Regression to the Mean podcast, you know what to do. Like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notifications to make sure you don't miss any of the content coming to you weekly on this channel. All right, Aiden. How we feeling? We feeling good? Ready to talk
rookies?
Let's
get into it. Yeah, let's get into it.
So we're going to start off with a guy that is, I'd say, pretty obvious to talk about today, because he weighs less than 170 pounds. So why don't you tell us about Xavier Worthy and what situation would be perfect for his skill set?
When you look at Xavier Worthy and that 4.2 speed, I want him in an offense, 1, that passes heavily, and 2, has creative play calling. I think the dream destination is pretty obvious to me. I would be quite excited for this one on Sundays, and that is the Miami Dolphins.
Wow. Really doubling down on speed. Really doubling down on speed. Who needs linemen when we can just have the 3 dudes who run sub 4.35 or whatever?
It would pretty much be like a 4x1 relay team at that point.
Formula One, just a Formula One racetrack on that offense.
But I think it makes a ton of sense. So just kind of looking at this Miami passing offense last year, it checks that first box I wanted. They had 2nd most passing yards in the NFL, 3rd highest scoring offense. So this is a team that throws it often, scores a ton of points. Looking at Tua, I know he gets a ton of shit. He's a good quarterback. He was PFF's top rated quarterback last year. Completion percentage, consistently 65, 70+%. Has done very well with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle over the last 2 years. And I know a lot of people will look at that as, a bit of a downside. Like, there's already 2 great wide receivers there. There's not a big enough pie for him to succeed here. And I just don't think that's the case. I think more weapons there will only, kind of help in terms of those other 2 guys. They really didn't have much in terms of a 3rd wide receiver last year. You've got Cedric Wilson had, under 300 yards. There really wasn't much outside of the top 2 guys there. So I think adding a 3rd guy to that offense would just be huge. Just get some easy matchups, whether it be via the slot or outside. I think he can line up either one and be plenty successful. I just think overall speed, like, you can't game plan for the 3 of them, especially when you've got Devon Achane too in the backfield. It's like, you've kind of got to pick your poison there, and he's going to get some, probably some layups, like some easy touches. So this is one that I really like. On top of that too, I don't think it's true, but if Tyreek, what he said was true last offseason, he is in his 2nd to last season here. If Tyreek Hill was really to retire after the 2025 season, we're looking at, potentially roll opening up in just, 2 seasons for him and Jalen Waddle going forward, which is an awesome combo. So I really like it. I think the speed makes a ton of sense. Mike McDaniel would, be drooling if they're somehow able to get him, whether it be the end of the 1st, maybe they move back into, the early part of the 2nd. This would be a really fun fit in my opinion.
It'd be just hilarious, because like, they desperately need offensive line help. I think you're picking in like the early 20s. Desperately need offensive line help. Christian Wilkins is gone. They could desperately use a defensive player, and if they just like tripled down on what they already have, that'd be so good. It'd be such a good bit. I would love it.
It wouldn't make sense. Like, it really doesn't make sense. But like, for fantasy and like #fun purposes, like, oh yeah, no, I'm all. They
need a third. They need a 3rd pass catcher though. That was very evident. Jalen Waddle got banged up. Tyreek Hill got banged up. Like, they need a 3rd pass catcher. Is that 3rd pass catcher maybe more of like a bigger body type? Would that benefit this offense? Like, maybe more of like a Keon Coleman possession slot receiver, big guy. Maybe that works for them. I definitely think whoever drafts Xavier Worthy, I'm just really hoping that they're adept at running that cheat motion, is what they call it, where they run it with Tyreek Hill, they run it with Deebo Samuel, like Puka Nacua was running it a little bit with the Rams, like where they get you running side to side before the snap. I think he has the type of speed and he has the type of ability to win on certain in certain situations, to really take advantage of that kind of unique wrinkle in offensive play calling, especially in the Shanahan-McVay tree. Matt Harmon came out with Xavier Worthy's profile. It was fine. He was pretty good against man coverage, not great against zone, and basically could not do anything against press man coverage. So this is somebody I think when he initially comes into the league is going to have to play more of a secondary, 3rd wide receiver role, where he's going to be a little bit more specialized, a little bit more of a role player. But I think in the right situation, he can absolutely hit home. Another team that I think can make a ton of sense for Worthy is Sean McVay and the Rams. I'm stealing this from Jordan Vanek, who actually was on the Yahoo Fantasy Football podcast and called this out. Like, I think he'd be so well suited to take over that Tutu Atwell role. Like, we know the Rams are willing to take small, skinny receivers. Tutu played relatively well, all things considered, last season. But if you put Worthy out there running those cheat motions as like the third option in this offense to open up space for Puka and for Kupp, I think this offense really could have some really special juice here. Like Marquise Brown in his rookie season was able to succeed in fantasy purposes as like a number 2, number 3 option. I think Xavier Worthy is pretty similar in build to Marquise Brown. And again, Worthy was ultra productive. I think everyone starts with Worthy's speed, like the 4.21 speed, which again, very big deal. But his size is relatively diminutive, so I get it. So that's what everyone wants to talk about is his height and his speed. But I think we're missing the forest from the trees here. This guy put up 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns as a true freshman in the Big 12 of Texas in 2021. So like, though he might have some inconsistent hands, though he might, not be like a true wide receiver in terms of his ability to create and win in separation, like full field routes, like I think he could be an absolute game breaker in the right role, in a specialized role, in the right offense. And we just got to get the ball in his hands and let him cook, man. So I love Miami. That's fun. I really like the Rams too. If he went to the Rams, I'd feel really excited about drafting him, honestly, or Miami. I'd be excited if he went to the Chiefs or the Bills. I think that all could work too. But I really want like an innovative play caller. And Andy Reid's an innovative play caller, but there's a little bit of a log jam with Hollywood Brown, Rich Rice, Travis Kelce even now, right? So I think Worthy in the right situation is going to absolutely go off. But if he goes to I'm trying to throw it out, like the New York Giants select him in the second round, or like the Carolina Panthers, like it's going to be. I'm not going to be that excited.
Be like the worst
for volume's sake. For volume's sake, it would be fine. But like, I don't ever think. Well, maybe I don't ever think. But out of the gates, I don't think this guy's going to be a high volume player.
No,
I think he's going to be a specialized guy that could just absolutely cook from week in, like maybe every 2
like
or
Deshaun
3
Jackson
weeks.
type vibes, where it's like
Ceiling case is Jackson, right?
Like we're gonna need big plays from him. Yeah, I'm not. Like we're not expecting a PPR merchant, and for that reason, like 1, I want a good QB, and 2, we need a good play caller. Those are gonna be very critical for his success, early on and beyond in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be elevating quarterbacks per se.
No, I doubt
but if he's like in a really good system, there'd be a lot to be excited about, honestly.
Yep.
But we'll see. I think he is probably one of the more situation dependent players in this draft in terms of wide receivers. Moving on to our next guy. By no means is this guy situationally dependent, right? I think this guy is going to be good.
Yeah.
I think this guy is going to be good regardless. But I do think that there's a fine line between him having a Dalton Kincaid rookie season and Sam Laporta rookie season based off of where he lands. And I'm talking about Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Brock Bowers, the prospect, but I was reading through a Brock Bowers write-up that Ian Hartis wrote today. And I think like this just contextualized how dominant Bowers has been at the tight end position. Like this is where he ranks Aidan amongst tight ends over the past 3 years. Number 1 in passer rating when targeted, number 1 in receiving yards, and he missed like 6 games this past year. Number 1 in touchdowns, number 1 in yards per route run, number 7 in yards per reception, number 10 in targets per route run, number 1 in PFF grade. Like again, to put this in context, because he's truly just an elite tackle breaking machine.
It's pretty
His
ridiculous.
8.5 yards after catch per reception is higher than every draft eligible wide receiver in this class. So he would have led this entire class in yak per reception. And if you took away his screen plays, because I know people are like, oh, screen merchant. He's a screen merchant, which again, you can run a fucking screen game through your tight end. That's pretty sick. All right. I'm going to put that out there. But even if you remove his yak per reception on screen plays, he still would rank 3rd in this entire class amongst all pass catchers and yards after catch per reception. So again, even with this information, with how dominant his profile is, I do think he is team dependent. And maybe I'm coming out and hedging my bet because all of us collectively were riding the Kyle Pitts to the moon rocket ship that has been grounded at the station for what feels like the past 2 seasons. So I think a lot of us are just kind of scarred and have PTSD from hyping up Kyle Pitts as the best tight end prospect of all time. He gets taken 4th overall. Like this guy can do it all. And then he lands with a coach who uses him as like Devontae Parker. Like that's basically the situation he got put in. And I think a lot of us are a little bit scarred. And then you look at Bowers' size. I think a lot of people like to point at Bowers' size. 6'3", 243. And so he's more of a tweener type. He's not like your true 6'5", 250 type tight end. And then we don't know his athletic testing. He did not run at the combine. He did not test at the combine. He is recovering from a tightrope ankle surgery. So a lot of people are speculating that, he hasn't been training to run those drills. And he doesn't really need to run those drills because if you just look at the tape, everything's there, right? So I think that's pretty fair with Bowers. But I think this is kind of giving us a look into why he may be kind of situational dependent because he's the exact same size as Sam Laporta. And he's honestly more dynamic and more athletic with the ball in his hands than Sam Laporta. And Sam Laporta was excellent with the ball in his hands at college, right? So this is again, all glowing stuff. This is not poo-pooing Sam Laporta at all. This is just showing how good Brock Bowers is as a prospect. But again, Brock Bowers is going to excel in flats, in screens, running up the seam. I don't know if he's going to excel if you're trying to teach him inline tight end right away off the jump, because a lot of rookie tight ends struggle out of the gates because they're learning two positions. They're learning how to be a pass catcher in the NFL, and they're learning how to be a blocker in the NFL. And that's why sometimes you see these slow maturation periods where they don't really crush it for fantasy on the first contract. Like, look at David Njoku, immense talented guy who just had his breakout in year like 6 of his career. I'm not saying that Bowers is David Njoku, but this is just the context of another highly drafted athletic tight end who took a while to break out. And a lot of that has to do with the fact is I don't know if the NFL coaches, and with Njoku, with Evan Ingram, with a lot of these guys, Kyle Pitts, how to use them. And I think what Sam Laporta is so encouraging about Aidan is the fact that he had Ben Johnson as his offensive coordinator. They had a real plan for Laporta and how to use him and how to deploy him. And he's just naturally incredibly talented. So I want Brock Bowers to land in that kind of dream situation where there's a highly competent offensive coordinator that's going to put him in a position to succeed, whether it's running like a Dallas Goedert type screen game through him, or whether it's lining him up in the slot to beat linebackers and safeties and allowing him to take like a 60-yard seam fade route to the house, which we've seen him do on tape. I don't think he needs to be schemed up that many touches, but you can scheme him up touches. And I think that if he's going to reach his full potential, especially out of the gates, I think he is going to have to go to the right situation. So, like, for example, he's mocked to the Jets as a situation, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to read too much into this, but, like, I don't think Nathaniel Hackett's that good of a play caller. And Aaron Rodgers has had a propensity to not get rookies super involved in the offense. Now, Brock Bowers is a unique situation because they could just run tight end screens for him, run him out in the flats. They can call specific plays where he's the only guy to go to. But knowing that Aaron Rodgers is 40, knowing that Nathaniel Hackett has an interesting history of play calling, I don't love that spot for him out of the gates. Like, I don't. Keegan, cover your ears. Keegan, our other co-host, longtime Jets fan, not on the call today. I don't love that. I don't love that for him, Aidan. I do love him on the Broncos. I do like that, even though the quarterbacks are terrible. I love him on the Broncos because Sean Payton has shown a history of developing and using tight ends. He was the OC when Jeremy Shockey had his incredible rookie campaign, and he basically built an entire pass game around Jimmy Graham, right, in the mid 2010s, where he was just absolutely dunking on the NFL and was one of the best fantasy players we've seen in that stretch, especially the tight end position. I think Sean Payton can get a lot out of him. The quarterback situation is a little bit murky, but I definitely feel confident that we can get him in a good position to have a really strong rookie season under Payton. But I'd say like my overall dream spot for Brock Bowers, and this would take a little bit of a tumble or a potential trade up, but I'd love him. I'd love him in Indy with Shane Steichen.
Yeah.
I think he would crush it. I think he would crush it. Shane Steichen created that Dallas Goedert role and really got Goedert involved in that offense. Brock Bowers is a supercharged Dallas Goedert, right? I just think he's super creative. He gets all of his playmakers involved. I like their tight end room. Like Jelani Woods is an interesting prospect player who's injured last year, but like this is definitely a position ripe for the taking. He would do really well with Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs. Like it's a good offense to drop Bowers in. And I just feel confident Shane Steichen would scheme him up 6 to 8 targets per game. Like I just feel like he would know how to use him, get him the ball, build out the offensive pass attack out of him and Michael Pittman. I think that'd be fantastic, dude. But I don't know if he's going to fall. Do you think Bowers will be there at 15 for the Colts?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if he's there for the Broncos either. It's, like, we'll see. I think, the
Jets
Broncos yeah, I know. But it's like the two things you said, like Aaron Rodgers, like I'm very familiar with Aaron Rodgers. It's never been the tight ends in his game.
Maybe in the red zone. Big Bob Tonyan caught 10 tutties, so maybe we get some red zone love. But like, I don't know.
That felt like such a one-off though. Like trying to find a tight end that like produced like during his tenure there. Like, man, it was always the wide receiver show and the running back. So, I'd like that for the Jets. I'd love that for Keegan. Like, again, I think he's such a unique prospect to where I'm confident the way he lands, he's going to be a focal point of the offense. Sean Payton, yeah, like you said, man, Jimmy Graham had a 4-year stretch where he had over 120 yards every season. Do I think that would be a year one, like reasonable expectation for Brock Bowers? Like probably not in Denver. Add in the QB kind of muckiness there. Like you probably need to figure out your quarterback.
Zach Wilson is a Bronco. Zach Wilson,
this type of luxury pick. Like you're really not in a position to be taking a unicorn tight end. Like, yeah, it's so Indy makes a ton of sense. Like maybe he does slip a couple of that. Once you get to 10 to 14, it's like, I don't know. This is very much a luxury pick. And I wouldn't say the Colts are in a position to be taking luxury picks, but like that's a better, like they're much closer to be able to like do a pick like this. Like you've got the QB, you've got your wide receiver one, you've got some nice pieces on defense. I think it makes a bit more sense there. So yeah, I'm pro Indy in terms of my like ideal spot for him. I think
the Saints could be an option too. Like they could be there at 14 to take them. They need tackle. They need corner. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of a mystery box. I think Indy would be probably my ideal one, and with Denver at the second option. I feel confident about Peyton. But moving on to our next guy, because we have Brock Bowers and Xavier Worthy, a little more high profile. Our next guy is another wide receiver whose collegiate production is just off the charts. If you look at every underlying statistical metric graph that compares these wide receivers against each other, like this guy's always in the top right corner, which is where you want to be in terms of production and efficiency. But it seems like the NFL's community scouts really aren't that high on him. But tell us why you think Troy Franklin in the right situation could be an exceptionally bullish fantasy option for dynasty managers.
Yep. Troy Franklin's a guy that I like a lot. As a UCLA fan myself, watched him a ton at Oregon the last couple of years. There's one fit for me, which I think makes a ton of sense, for a number of reasons, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers.
Whoa, fun.
In a perfect world, I would say a perfect world, but I think a lot of people want them to go wide receiver at 5. They just have so many holes on their roster. I find it hard to believe that under this new kind of GM and coach that they swing for the fences that early at 5. I'd be willing to bet they trade back, 10 picks, pick up another couple picks on day 2. And then maybe take a wide receiver in the second round, which is, likely where Troy Franklin's going to go. I don't see this as a guy that's going to make it to the third round, but Troy Franklin there, at the beginning or middle of the second round, depending on what kind of picks they get from that trade back, I think makes a ton of sense. Just looking at like the offense in terms of touches that are no longer there, like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, and Gerald Everett being gone opens up over 50% of the receptions, targets, yards, and touchdowns from last season. And outside of
all of it's vacated targets. We got to be careful with vacated targets, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
It is
Justin Herbert.
It is up for the taking here.
Whoever's going to be catching passes with the Chargers next year.
Yeah, so you've got Quentin Johnston, which I know people have mixed feelings about him. The numbers historically don't bode well for him. I'm not closing the curtain on him as a bag owner myself. But just looking at the opportunity there, it's amazing. You're talking to Justin Herbert, who again I don't know, a lot of people really don't like Justin Herbert, and I don't get it. The guy's just historically productive. If he's not injured last year, he's on a 17-game pace for over 4,000 yards again, which would have been his 4th time in a row to start his career. Just incredible quarterback play. They're probably going to shift to, a slightly more, run balance offense, which I think makes sense. It's not realistic for Justin Herbert to, continue to shoulder the load of that offense, especially when you look at that wide receiver room. It's not realistic. And then looking at Troy Franklin, you look at his size and, you probably figure he's more of a slot receiver in the NFL. I'm curious how he's going to be used. He played 80% of his snaps out wide, which I thought was interesting in college, just kind of given his size. I think he'll probably mix into both of those. ADOT of over 12 yards can absolutely take the top off of the defense. And then you look at it just year over year metrics, kind of like you alluded to, and it's progression pretty steadily every year. Yak went up, yards per route run went up, receptions, yards, touchdowns. Everything from his true freshman year into his junior year last year, where he went for over 1,300 yards, 10 plus touchdowns. This is the progression you want to see from an early declared Power 5 wide receiver.
Young, and he's young too.
He's young.
He's still 20, 21.
Yeah,
he's still a young prospect.
This guy's a beast. And then just looking at the Chargers, there's no reason why he couldn't step in as their wide receiver 1 or 2 from day one. There is no one in that room challenging him for touches. This could be Justin Herbert's new go-to wide receiver. There's very little stopping him. So now I think this is an ideal scenario. We kind of talk about Xavier Worthy in terms of don't love him as the first or second option. I don't love Troy Franklin as probably your first option in an offense, but I think as your second option, I'm a huge fan of this one. I think he'd look awesome running around in those powder blues, catching 50-yard bombs from Justin Herbert next year.
My fits for him are a little bit different, right? I think you went with vacated target volume, quarterback with a cannon, and a receiver who can get open, which I think is super fair. Franklin fits with Justin Herbert really well. Yeah. I went the other route with an elite quarterback, so I think personally he'd be the ideal replacements for MVS and Gabe Davis for the Bills and the Chiefs. I think that he could play that role really well, whether running as a flanker or a speed slot player, where you're running clear out routes where you have to respect his speed and his game breaking ability. Or you're having him in kind of a specialized deep downfield role. I think he would excel in that. He's 6'1", 176 for the listeners at home. So he's a string bean. He's a wiry fella. So he's got Devontae Smith's frame, but he doesn't have Devontae Smith's ability to beat press man coverage. So Franklin has good numbers against zone coverage, fine numbers against man coverage, and then really poor numbers against press man. So he struggled when he was put up at the line of scrimmage. it's going to be pretty hard for him to get better against stronger NFL corners at that part of his game. But I do think in the right situation, he can be an excellent deep downfield receiver. At the combine, he tested really well on explosive metrics. So like his 4.4 140 was really strong. He had a strong performance in the vertical and broad jump, but he didn't do as well in the agility drills, like the shuttle and 3-cone. And you see that on tape. You see him being super explosive, like that touchdown against USC, where he basically puts 1 foot down and he's gone. Like, what the hell? He catches in traffic, wiggles a little bit with his hips, puts 1 foot down, and he's gone for like an 80-yard touchdown. You're like, wow, this dude's speed is different, especially in space. But his like he runs a little stiff. It's like hard. It's like more like watching a gazelle run. It's like straight line runner, maybe like a quick cut, but like he doesn't seem like he has that natural hip fluidity that you see. And it's hard to describe. It's like his legs are so long, so maybe it's just like an optical illusion. But it looks like his feet are kind of slow. I don't really know how to like articulate it. I just think he's more of like a specialized role player that if put in the right situation with a good quarterback could absolutely crush. People have comped him similarly to Jordan Addison. I don't know if he has the agility that Addison had, but like in terms of this guy on lower volume could absolutely crush with a good quarterback. Where you look up and you're like, Troy Franklin had 2 touchdowns and 180 yards today. Like, and then he goes quiet for a couple of weeks and he does it again. Like he's that kind of player, in my opinion, where he can have a major impact in fantasy. It'll just be maybe like kind of a boom or bust profile candidate week to week. But like you can't ignore the production he had in college because he had just absolutely fucking phenomenal production, like truly elite production. So he's kind of at a conundrum, right? But I think overall, put him with a really good quarterback, and I do think that quarterback can take advantage of his skill set. Put him with a bad quarterback, I think you're going to see somebody who struggles to play through contact and doesn't have very great hands. So like it's one of those like he's very situational dependent, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I'm excited to see where he lands. He's an interesting prospect for sure.
Last guy here, because we got to talk about running backs, and I alluded to it, where these guys are more, I think, specialized role dependent. The first 3 that we talked through. But this guy, I think, is volume dependent because I think he has a lot to do in the developmental department as a runner, especially behind the line of scrimmage. Sometimes he gets a little bit too freelancy and a little bit dancey. He'll just YOLO and open block just to see and get himself get more. And, coaches love that, right? So I think the guy in question here is Trey Benson, the running back out of Florida State. He is somebody that I think if you told me in 2 years this guy is a top 12 fantasy running back, I would not be shocked, like at all. Like he profiles as a 3-down workhorse. But then if you also told me that this guy like gets benched regularly or is like a 3rd string running back, wouldn't be that shocked either based off his inconsistency. So I think he's very situational dependent on where he lands, what coaching staff he works with, what opportunities he has off the jump. And if he's sharing, touches with a veteran who just makes all the right reads, falls down for 3 yards, has a good success rate, because it's going to be hard for him to get touches from a very good veteran that does that, the coaches like. But when you're looking at Trey Benson, this guy profiles super similarly to Kenneth Walker, both as an athlete and both just as a style of runner, which is, it's very exciting to think that there's another Kenneth Walker type talent in this draft. Because like, I don't get why more people aren't talking about him. Like I know the medical injury concerns Aidan. Yeah. I know he dances, doesn't have the best vision, but like, listen to these comps between him and Kenneth Walker. Trey Benson, 6 foot 216. Kenneth Walker, 5'9", 211. Trey Benson ran a 4.39 40. Kenneth Walker, 4.38. Benson, 33.5 vertical. Walker, 34. Like they have very similar explosive metrics. I get that Walker had better stats in college, especially his last year over at Michigan State. But from a play style standpoint, these are both ultra explosive players who consistently make defenders miss in space. They're maybe not the most consistent down-to-down guys, but in the NFL, we're always seeking explosives. We're always seeking guys that are big enough to play through contact, big enough to break tackles, and explosive to get extra yards after breaking that initial contact. And this is what you have in Trey Benson here. And Benson doesn't have the usage again that Kenneth Walker had, but Benson was a much better pass catcher than Walker was. Benson only caught 20 balls in 2023, but on 24 targets, he racked up 227 receiving yards and 1.46 yards per route run. I get the medical concerns, but this dude can flat out play. And like, if you put him in a situation where he's like the 1A to a slower, not as useful 1B, or like a plodding 1B, and then he comes in and he's like the lightning element where he maybe can catch some passes too because the other guy doesn't catch passes. Like if you put him on the Chargers, I think that's ultra exciting. Gus Edwards is going to steal his goal line carries, right? J.K. Dobbins is lurking too with his injury history, but you're in a situation where like Gus Edwards can't catch the ball and he can't create explosives. So it puts Trey Benson in a good spot. I really like him with New York too. I like Devin Singletary. Coaches like Devin Singletary, but like,
I'm good.
This guy offers this, like he offers true explosive ability and he can catch the ball. Something Devin Singletary isn't amazing at. He's done it a little bit more over the years. And then whoever, if he lands in Dallas, I mean, like we're talking about a potential, top 12 pick in Dynasty at the running back position. Like those are his outcomes, right? If he lands in that situation, it's like I feel like with Benson, the talent is immense. I think the potential's there. I think he has a lower floor than some prospects, and like we need a coaching staff who is patient, can design a good run game, get him scheme touches, and trust him a little bit because like some coaches are just going to pull him immediately, right? Like so. I'm curious to know what you think about Benson. We haven't talked too much about him, and I'm curious to know your favorite spots for him.
I think you kind of nailed this one. I think like the speed that he possesses at his size
Elite.
is pretty rare. ETR, our buddies over at Establish the Run, they have a list of day two running back since 2005 who ran a 4.4 or better between 210 and 220 pounds. So exactly where he is. The first two, Brees Hall and DeMarco Murray, two pretty much mainstays in fantasy football. Ben Tate, Jerry Snorwood, and JJ Arrington as well. So this isn't a perfect model. It's not a 100% hit rate, but I think too, very interesting comps there. One of my favorite fits, I think you nailed a couple. Like back to Dallas, like whoever lands in Dallas, that's that's
RB1.
fantasy gold mine. Yeah,
RB1 in this draft.
That's going to be the top running back taken. I like the Giants. Yeah, I don't think Devin Singletary is the answer. I don't think he's a 3-down back. Benson possesses what he does plus so much more. So I like that one. I think a fun one that I've seen a couple times too is the Arizona Cardinals. I think just he has a lot of this. He has a lot of similar
James Conner backup to start
as James Conner. But James Conner is consistently missing 4 or 6 games a season. And even if I just think he could split touches with him a lot. Like we don't have to run James Conner into the ground anymore. I think Benson gives some juice, but again, very similar. Like they can both catch passes. I think they're both very good in between the 20s. I think this would be a pretty complimentary role, but I like the Cardinals. And then you get the Chargers too. I think that one's a pretty common, running back landing spot that we're all looking at. Is it just feels like there's a lot of touches. Sure they just signed Dobbins and Edwards, but they're really not all that committed to anyone yet. Like we haven't even opened training camp. Who's to say?
No.
Who's even the starter right now? It's probably Gus. I know the GM has spoken very highly of him, but that's a good one. So I would personally lean Arizona or Dallas. I think those would be my favorite in terms of offenses that I think are going to score points. I think the Giants are going to be dumpster fire personally. So it's hard for a running back to really succeed without very high volume and touchdowns.
Pass catching too. He's going to have to be catching.
I don't know.
Passes.
I'm not going to be drafting a ton of Giants in general. And then Chargers, there's just a couple too many cooks in the kitchen, in my opinion, with the 2 offseason additions. I find it hard to believe that they're going to invest early. Unless someone that's not named like Corum. Exactly. Yeah. You beat me to it. I find it hard to believe that they're going to take a running back that early. They might choose for some of the later options, but he's fun. It feels like, there's a lot to like here. Like the athletic profile and the testing is very interesting. Someone's going to take a shot on him and, could be, uber productive in the NFL.
What if the Dolphins take him to be the Mostert replacement? And it's like him and AJ.
Oh God, that would kind of piss me off. But
for the short term, long term that could be really fun. But
yeah,
short term,
long term that could be fun because I'm looking
open highways for Benson to run through. Just
because I'm just sitting here with H-Chan, I can't believe I have to wait another year with Mostert here. And if they add another one, I'd be like, you guys are killing me. This is a true dynasty hold at this point because it would probably be a pretty slow rookie year for him. I can't imagine between behind those 2 guys he's getting a lot of touches, but
I like the Cardinals. That's a good one. I like their run game. And James Conner does get hurt a ton, and he's also old, so it could be the natural James Conner replacement. That's
it could be a fun one. Yeah, it's we're gonna find out in a couple days, which is awesome. We're finally here. These guys are getting real jerseys soon.
Well, that's gonna do it for our 4 players that could skyrocket up dynasty rankings with the right situation. Aidan, appreciate you for hopping on. Cannot wait to see the Caleb Williams jersey when it's ordered. That'll be big for the program.
Very soon. Very soon.
All right, man. Thanks for hopping on, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Until next time.